Dr. Joe here at Atlas Health, and today I'm sharing part two of the how autoimmune paleo and ketogenic diet can actually make you worse, or any other restricted diet can make you worse over time. And I just want to start out by giving a little perspective, or idea about where my perspective is coming from. And so I've been in clinical practice for 15 years, and I actually recommend autoimmune paleo diet daily, if not weekly, for sure. Weekly, maybe even daily. I often recommend a FODMAP diet for people that I see. I often recommend, I really love a ketogenic diet, I think. So before all of you, just hang on for a second. Now, before all you blow your stacks about what an idiot I am, because obviously autoimmune paleo really worked for you, or ketogenic helped you lose 30 pounds, and look at all the literature suggesting how awesome these diets are. Just remember that I'm not saying at all that these diets are bad. What I'm saying is there are a number of people that do these diets and actually feel worse. And there are a number of people out there that are considering doing these diets, that are researching it because they have a health crisis and they're wondering if it will work for them. And I love that people are out there doing their own research. But I sit in my office every day and I talk to somebody who had a crappy reaction to some sort of diet that they tried because they read a book and didn't have any sort of actual individual assessment, or somebody who has lost just about every food but 3 foods, and they're asking me, what can I eat? And I tell them the story of oral tolerance. And if you missed the video on oral tolerance, check us out on our Facebook page. Oral tolerance is part 1 of this whole thing. And without exception, when I share with them the story of oral tolerance and how we address it and how we can help them get their food back, they say, "Doc, I wish I would have known this sooner." So here's the deal. I answered that question so many times, and the rest of my staff, that we're making videos now so that people can have access to this information before they get really sick. So that's where I'm coming from. Okay, so my goal in this video is to list a few factors that one might consider to help remediate oral tolerance. Now, unless I was the Micro Machines man and I could speak at that rate, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through in a constructive way all that information. So my goal is to make a list today and make a series of videos that will spend a little bit of time, more time on each topic, and as questions come up, spend more time answering those questions. And then at the very end of today, my goal is to provide a list of foods that a person could actually eat. And by the way, I have not examined you. I have not done any labs on you. I have not looked at any forms. I have no idea what your medical history is, what your personal health history is, what your social history is. I don't know what's worked for you in the past, what hasn't worked. I don't know what medications you're taking. I don't know what sort of autoimmunity you're dealing with or infectious disease that you have. So the question that I can't answer for you specifically is, what can I eat, doctor? I just don't know without that information. And the whole point of the first video is to say that if I go out and just recommend a blanket diet for everybody, and they have a loss of oral tolerance, and then they do that diet based on my recommendation, and they end up worse for the wear, it's completely unethical and irresponsible. So I don't do that. Okay. So back to the original discussion of oral tolerance. We know that a loss of oral tolerance is really the underlying mechanism that causes food sensitivities. A loss of chemical tolerance is the underlying mechanism that causes sensitivity to things that you smell, or chemicals, or dry cleaning stuff, or cigarette smoke, right? And loss of tolerance to things like pollens and molds in the environment might be an allergy, right? That's loss of tolerance to that. And loss of tolerance to yourself is called autoimmunity. Okay, so oral tolerance, and a number of people are commenting on research. Just go to PubMed and type in oral tolerance, and type in oral tolerance and autoimmunity, and you'll see the connection between what happens in our small intestine and autoimmunity. So again, just a brief summary, food goes into the small intestine, from the stomach, and because the stomach was inefficient for various reasons, which we'll get into in later videos, the protein is now chunks of protein instead of individual amino acids. And there's a section of immune system cells called the gut-associated lymphatic tissue that hangs around the small intestine in this little area called Peyer's patches. And they decide whether or not these foods that are not amino acids now, which our body can't really use, food, we need to break it down into amino acids, are either something that we want in our body, which is a thumbs up, not creating inflammation, or a thumbs down, creating more inflammation. Okay? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that mechanism later on, specifically the connection between the liver and the other lymph cells in the body, or the lymph glands, etc. But for now, it's to say that those cells really decide what happens with oral tolerance, or they're one of the key players. Okay? So when a person changes their diet and they've restricted foods, and if there are other factors that are causing oral tolerance to be still lost, then after a honeymoon phase, they will start reacting to the new food. And the new food will create the same symptoms as the old food. So like the person that's eating like pizza and getting like nasty gas, diarrhea, bloating, fatigue, headaches, migraines, etc., allergy symptoms, insomnia, now all of a sudden gets off pizza and other gluten-containing foods, or they do an autoimmune paleo diet, for example, and they feel amazing. They lose weight, they lose bloat, they get their libido back, they're feeling awesome, and then after like an inordinate period of time of that, all of a sudden they eat farm-raised eggs with organic kale that was massaged with extra virgin olive oil that wasn't heated and mixed with other organic vegetables, and now all of a sudden they get the exact same response. And they're like, okay, what do I do now? And then they go back to original foods, because no matter what they eat, they start feeling like crap, and they have a worse reaction to the original foods, and then they're like, now what do I do? That's what this video is really talking about, and I want you to know that we're going to get into later on how to look for early signs of that. Okay, but what I want to do today is go back to the list. Okay, so here's the list. To remediate oral tolerance, we need to know a little bit about what's going on at the stomach. We need to know why there may be inefficient digestion at the stomach. Okay, so we need to know those factors related to hormones that affect the stomach. We need to know factors of the brain and how it affects the stomach. We need to know something about food combining and how it affects the stomach. And we need to do something about infectious disease, for example. Okay, we need to know things about metabolic and other immune issues. And we're going to spend a lot of time on the stomach later on. Once the food goes into the stomach, we need to understand what's waiting for it, okay? And so does this person have a pancreatic issue where they're not releasing pancreatic enzymes? Do they have a gallbladder issue where they're not releasing gallbladder juices, bile, to absorb fat? Because I can tell you, if you're going to do the keto diet and you have a gallbladder problem, you will suffer mightily. It's just going to be a horrible experience for you, okay? Now, if you look at what's going on in the small intestine, there's supposed to be stuff that lives in there. Bacteria, okay? And are there enough good bacteria? Do we need to know a lot about the microbiome? And are there too many bad bacteria, or yeast like Candida, or is there a parasite, or is there good bacteria but there's just too many of them? What's the integrity of the lining of the intestine? That meaning, are the cells that are supposed to glue the small intestine cells together and keep undigested material from getting into the lymph tissue, are those barriers intact? We need to know something about that. We need to know something about the microvilli, which are these little finger-like projections from the small intestine, cells that face the lumen of the intestine that absorb food. Are they actually working? Because a person that takes digestive enzymes to help them with hydrochloric acid and stomach secretions and make the protein break down, and the person that takes pancreatic enzymes that helps with all the pancreatic stuff, and the person that takes gallbladder enzymes if needed to help absorb the fat, if all that's fine and dandy, but the microvilli are not working, nothing will happen. And what will happen is that food will sit in the small intestine, and then the bacteria, they go nuts. And then you end up with the small intestine bacterial overgrowth or a candida problem that will now perpetuate a loss of oral tolerance that will not heal specifically with dietary change alone. We need to know something about those dendritic cells that cause the immune response. basically the immune response of antigen presentation, yes or no. And we need to know something about another type of immune cell called a regulatory T cell, which does just that. It regulates other cells like antigen-presenting cells. And so let's say an antigen-presenting cell goes like this. The regulatory T cell can make sure that that doesn't become this inappropriate, huge, enormous immune reaction instead of like a mild inflammatory issue that the rest of the body can regulate through checks and balances. Okay? Once the dendritic cell makes a decision, yes or no, if it makes the no decision, then there's communication in an area called the Peyer's patches, which sit outside the intestines, and then it goes to the liver, and then the liver gets to make a decision on oral tolerance. So let's say the dendritic cells are like giving signals, but then the liver is unhappy or it's depleted, then the liver can also decide that there's a loss of oral tolerance. And then the rest of the lymphoid tissue, like in the neck and in the armpits, right? Okay, when you go to the doctor, you got a sore throat, they touch your neck and they touch back here, the posterior cervical chain, and they're like, okay, are your lymph nodes swollen? Do the rest of the lymph nodes have viruses they're dealing with? Do they have bacteria they're dealing with? Are there stealth infections like Lyme, mycoplasma, things like that? So we need to understand what's going on with the rest of the immune system in relation to infectious disease and then also in relation to history of autoimmunity. And then we need to understand something about the hormones. Okay, so thyroid hormone, its relationship to the small intestine. Thyroid hormone, its relationship to gallbladder and pancreas. Thyroid hormone, its relationship to the microbiome. Thyroid hormone, its relationship to hydrochloric acid secretion. Thyroid hormone, its relationship to the brain and the vagus nerve, and its relationship to the stomach. We need to know something about cortisol and cortisol's relationship to digestion, absorption, elimination. We need to know something about sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and their relationship with the health of the lining of the intestine, and then also with oral tolerance in relationship to the immune regulation of hormones. Once we have a good idea of what's going on in that map, we can actually start constructing a model of correction of oral tolerance. So that's the list. And for those of you that were hoping I was going to get into this long story about what I can eat, we're going to get into that right now, okay? But what we're going to do is, in subsequent videos, I'm going to spend a lot of time on each and every single factor that we just talked about, which is stomach, small intestine, immune system, and hormones and their relationship to oral tolerance. And we could go on and on and on. It could basically be an infinite class, okay? And it will be, because we really want people to know what's going on so that they can make a healthy decision for themselves and their family. Okay, so what am I supposed to eat, doctor? With the caveat that I have no idea because I haven't examined you, let's just talk about some things that will definitely mess up oral tolerance. And if you avoid these things, the probability that you lose oral tolerance will be less, and the probability that you heal from a loss of oral tolerance will be greater because one major variable will be off the board. Remember the story of the dendritic cell. You cannot attach an antibody to an amino acid. You can only attach an amino acid or an antibody to a protein that isn't broken all the way down. Okay? So why are we having all these autoimmune conditions right now? And why are kids like suddenly, when I was in school, for example, there was like one person at the can't eat a peanut table. But now it's like you're an outlier if you're the only person that can tolerate a peanut without eating an EpiPen. Like, what's going on? Okay, and so my opinion, and there's research on these things, but this is my opinion, is that when things like pesticides and herbicides in food colorings bind to the protein, so for example, when you get like a cinnamon flavored candy and you put it in your mouth and it turns bright red, and then like your tongue turns color and you try to rinse it out and like your tongue doesn't change color, what's going on there? Those red dyes have basically bound to your tissue, which is why it isn't just rinsing off like paint. And so basically your immune system now has to scrape it off. And so foods, like what you should eat are foods that are devoid of food coloring that has bound to the protein, because that dendritic cell does not recognize a protein that's bound to food coloring as friendly. because our body can do nothing with that protein. Does that make sense? Like, where are you going to put protein that's blue colored in your body that's of any use whatsoever? Where are you going to put that chemical in your body? Nowhere. You're going to filter it out, hopefully through the liver, and your liver's going to have to deal with it, and you can lose chemical tolerance to food coloring, which we see all the time. And we'll do a whole talk about that later on. Okay? But there's really no place for it. Where does plastic belong in your body? Okay? And just go to PubMed and read about bisphenol A and autoimmune disease. Bisphenol A and Hashimoto's. Bisphenol A and multiple sclerosis. Bisphenol A and systemic polyautoimmunity. Bisphenol A and chemical tolerance or oral tolerance. And the thing is bisphenol A, there's now bisphenol A free plastics that are bisphenol C or bisphenol AC. We just haven't done the research on them, so it's bisphenol free. But like, just get plastic out of your diet, seriously. Do not put heated food in plastic, right? But it seems like basics, but like people just forget this stuff. Do not eat anything that's sitting on plastic that was in heated plastic. Do not drink any water that was in a plastic bottle that was heated. Do not put hot things in containers that are glass or steel and then drink through a plastic lid. Those are like some big things that you can do. Pesticides and herbicides. So the way pesticides work, or herbicides work, is they bind to the protein of the bug or the plant, and then it kills them. It burns them, right? So like if you eat a food that has pesticide burned into it, or herbicide burned into it, the dendritic cells do not recognize that protein anymore, and you'll get the thumbs down response, you'll get the Peyer's patch response, gut-associated lymphatic tissue, to the liver, you'll get the chemical response in the liver, it'll go systemic through the lymphatic system to the lymph nodes, and you'll have a systemic immune response, and it's just a matter of time. Okay? So hopefully that bit of information is somewhat useful, and I just want to emphasize there is no amount of food coloring that I would consider healthy, and there's no amount of plastics that I would consider healthy or useful. And we can start talking, we can have a whole nother discussion about food additives and their role, but food additives also do weird things to the microbiome, and food additives also do weird things to proteins, particularly for people that have an issue with an inefficient digestive system, which we'll get into in a big way when we start talking about the brain and oral tolerance in later videos. So like I'm way over my typical like 5 to 6 minute video. I hope that you found this useful, and I look forward to a discussion with people online here. It's been a lot of fun, and I can say this, please, let's make it constructive. So people that are just like trolling or gonna lob insults and start cussing and all this will just be banned. We are very open here, and we actually learn stuff from patients every single day and non-patients, people that are just logging into our website and logging into Atlas Health on Facebook, and we learn from them every day. So we actually really appreciate information, but we'll do without all the negative, snarky comments. And for those of you that are wondering, I have like 3 extra stethoscopes on the way. I'm going to wear them all next time, just so that we can like, you know, really filter out the people that want the information. Okay, have a great day. Have a good weekend. Bye.